A few weeks ago, on the 3rd of March, Sarah Everend was abducted from Clapham at 9:30 p.m. as she walked to go and meet a friend. Subsequently, her body was found and it has been declared a murder, with a suspect being a police officer. This story has dominated the news cycle here in England, and there's been a kind of a reaction to it where women are now sharing their stories of how they have felt walking the streets at night alone, and the ways that they protect themselves from possible attackers. My friend Mark has made a very good video going into the statistics about murder and about other violent crimes against women and against men. I won't go over all the details here, but I'll leave a link to that in the description so you can get a really good breakdown of that. But just to summarize, I'd like to point out that men are more often the victims of murder than women, and it's also true of most violent crimes. In terms of murder, 75% of victims are men. That's in the UK, not worldwide statistics. And the overall murder rate for people living in the UK is very low compared to other causes of death, both unnatural and natural, and it's also low compared to other countries in the world. All of that is not to say that women are silly to try to protect themselves or try to mitigate the risk of being attacked or murdered or assaulted in other ways. But I just think that it's important to put issues in perspective sometimes. Since there are many women at the moment sharing their experiences of what it's like to be female, I thought that I would just make a video sharing a few little anecdotes about things that happened in my own life, which are a little different to what you might be reading otherwise. I grew up and have pretty much always lived in a very low crime area of England. I won't tell you the name of the town I live in, but if you've ever seen the film Hot Fuzz, then you can just imagine that I live in that town in the film of Hot Fuzz, but without the serial killers. It's a town where you might not literally leave your doors open or unlocked, but that is the kind of spirit of what I'm trying to get at, where the expectation of a crime occurring is very low. There are, of course, crimes, and the crimes get reported in the local paper that I used to deliver as a teenager. My brothers both had morning paper rounds where they would get up early, usually before the sun had risen in the case of winter, and deliver papers all around town. But when I tried to get a job like that, the newsagent who employed my brothers said that he was unsure about employing a girl to do the same thing because he didn't think it was right to send a girl out to deliver papers during what is effectively the end of the night time. To me, at the time, I think I was probably 14 years old. I thought that was kind of an old-fashioned view and maybe being a little bit too cautious, but since we're talking about the subject, I thought I might as well mention that. The only reason I made the connection with the papers is because I delivered the paper every week. So I always saw the two local papers that I delivered in the evening after school. And if there ever was a serious crime, like a shop being broken into, it would be reported on the front page, and that was very rare. When I started my paper round, my mother bought me a rape alarm, which, if you don't know, it's a small pocket-sized device that it kind of works like a grenade, where you pull the pin out and it makes a very loud, very high-pitched squealing sound. I think after she gave that to me, I probably carried it maybe once or twice on my paper route, but I left it at home on every other occasion after that, and I don't know what happened to it. And I never felt in any danger when doing my paper round, except from the dogs who would bark at me from the other side of the door. Similarly, when I got a little bit older and I started going to my friends' houses and staying out late, I would often walk home on my own for 20 minutes or more across town. And at that time in my life, I'm quite embarrassed to say that I was still kind of afraid of ghosts. If I'd just seen a horror movie at a friend's house, or if if I was just in a kind of spooky mood, I'd often get jumpy, like looking behind me and looking around. But I wasn't scared of a murderer or a kidnapper. I was more scared of like a supernatural thing coming to get me. And that's not to say that I ever believed in that stuff. It's kind of hard to describe. Maybe that's for a different video. But I was the scary things that I'd seen in horror films would get into my head, and I'd like just really want to check that they weren't chasing me or whatever. My town had street lights that went off at midnight. So they were on a timer, and often I would walk home after midnight and there would be no street lights at all, and the moon was the only thing lighting the way, which to be honest, the amount of light wasn't really consequential. The only thing that really scared me was when I was walking home and the lampposts were on, and then it would turn midnight, and in the space of a second, all of the light would go out, and suddenly, my eyes would have to adjust to the darkness, and that was quite frightening. Again, it's something that me and my friends did. We would have parents who would sometimes insist on, dropping us home in the car, or one of my friends, if she was worried about me, she might tell me to call her when I arrived home, just so she wouldn't worry about me, and I often forgot to do that. Being kind of a tomboy, I would sometimes make a joke of walking my other girlfriends home. So if they were at my house, or we were both staying at someone else's house, then I might offer to walk one of my friends home to protect her, ostensibly, but actually it was just a good excuse for a nice walk and a chat. Really, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't want to do it. It was definitely not something I felt like I needed to do, and obviously, after walking my friend home, I then needed to walk home on my own. Similarly, when I started to be friends with boys, I'd sometimes get a guy who offered to walk me home, but it was a similar situation where I'm pretty sure that he was just interested in having a nice walk and a chat, and maybe a kiss goodnight. It wasn't really about protecting me. It was just about having a nice walk. And I really treasure those times, going for a really nice walk in that really quiet time of night where there's really not many cars on the road, and maybe the streetlights have already gone out. It's quite romantic in the in the literal sense and in the more general sense. One experience I do want to share with you was when I, on a night like this, I was walking home from a friend's house, and I think it was very late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was walking down just a residential street back to my house. It was near the town centre, and I heard footsteps behind me, of someone who was walking faster than I was, so he was catching up to me. So I had a quick glance just to check, who it was, whatever, just to see what was going on, and it's a young man in a hoodie and jeans, and at that point I'm just kind of conscious of him. I've noticed him, and it's at the top of my awareness, like keeping an eye on, like, what is this guy going to do next? And he came like all the way up to me and stopped me to say something to me. And at that point I was like, okay, is this guy going to murder me? Like what reason could a stranger have to talk to me at 2 in the morning, like just on the street? I couldn't think of any innocent reason, but he just stopped me, and he was like, oh, hey, like he didn't make any acknowledgement of the fact that he might have frightened me at all. He just went like, oh, do you know anyone who I could buy weed from? Like drugs. I think he said weed. I can't remember what exactly. He might have just said, no, he didn't say drugs. He said weed. He just said, hey, do you know anywhere that I can buy weed? And I think I laughed out loud, because I was just relieved that this was a normal weird reaction, and not like that he wasn't trying to attack me. He was actually being kind of friendly about it, even though I think he probably could have done with a bit more social awareness, can I say. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, perhaps I need to explain to a few people watching that you just don't do that. If you see a young lady or anyone on the street late at night, just just be aware that they might be frightened of you, and don't just walk up to them if you want drugs. I don't know. Maybe he was going to attack me and then he lost his nerve. I don't know. I really don't know what was going on there, but maybe he just really, really wanted weed. When I moved away for university, I moved to a pretty big city. I won't say where I went, but it's a city you would have heard of, where the crime is not the most famous thing about that city, but it's definitely not known as like an especially safe place to live. It's probably not quite as dangerous as London, but maybe not far off. The funny thing about living there is that wherever I would walk, I lived kind of in the town centre there, in the city centre, in the halls of residence, and then later in the student digs that we lived in. And there were always students around because we lived near the university and near the town. No matter what time of night you went out, whether it was a weekday or a weekend, there were always people around, and that made me feel even safer than I had in my safe hot fuzz town that I came from. Unlike my hometown, the lights stayed on all night there, so the lampposts were always on. There was always cars on the road, and there were often businesses open. There'd be, you'd be going past a kebab shop or a bar every street or so. So I never ended up feeling unsafe, even though I was living in a much less safe city.
Hello, this is Poe the editor, and I just wanted to insert a little addendum to this video where I thought I'd mention that I did once witness a crime when I was at university living in that city. That was at broad daylight in a residential area, which is why I neglected to mention it in the video, but it just came to mind because that was probably the time I felt most afraid for my own safety. It was in the middle of the morning and I was going for a run, and there was a sort of a domestic dispute playing out, and the guy was being quite violent towards his girlfriend, and I I had to go to court to witness this, her pressing charges against this guy, and I was always afraid that that guy would get mad at me if he ever saw me again, so I always avoided that part of town after that.
And similarly, at that time in my life, I never got an offer to walk me home from anyone. Maybe I just had a different kind of friendships at that time in my life when I was a little bit older, but nobody was concerned enough about my safety to want to walk me back home. And I was fine with that. And just to bookend that little series of anecdotes, I'll just say that these days I never go out late anywhere because I don't have a social life anymore, and because there's COVID and I have a baby and I'm married, and I never stay out past midnight. As if to demonstrate the lampposts that would go off at midnight, the light that illuminated my car has now turned off automatically, and it won't come back on. So the rest of the video will be in darkness. But I want to come back to this point about women feeling unsafe when they are alone at night, especially. And I've seen a few articles discussing the phenomenon of catcalling, or just general harassment on, by strangers in public outdoors. And it doesn't seem to be a coincidence that this is being discussed in tandem with this Sarah Everend case that's now being reported on quite heavily. There seems to be a link between women feeling afraid of being kidnapped, of being murdered, of being abused, and catcalling, of the verbal harassment that they get from men, usually, when they are outdoors. And I can see how those two things are linked in the mind of the woman experiencing it. Just like the man who came up to me and wanted to buy drugs, it's not that that man was a murderer or that he had any ill intent. It's the fact is that up until the point where he is talking to me and he's not trying to kidnap me, I really don't know whether he is a safe man or not, or whether he's going to attack me or not. There's a very visceral reaction that human beings have to being in danger, and it's not just humans, it's all animals. There's a fight or flight instinct when we feel like we're attacked. And I think especially for women, that isn't just triggered by by a literal predator, by the signs of a literal a beast that might want to eat us. It's also triggered by men who could be rapists. I'm not an expert on such things. I'm not a biologist, but from my understanding of psychology and evolution, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that there is a mechanism psychologically that women have that men do not experience, where we are frightened of men who make unwanted advances, whether they are safe or dangerous otherwise. If a woman is not interested in a man and there's no incentive to continue an interaction with him, then it is safer to assume that he is a potential attacker than otherwise. And that is not fair on men, but that is just the fact of psychology. It's just an instinct, which means it can easily be overcome with with the application of higher faculties, basically to reason your way out of that fear. In the same way that I'm afraid of ghosts that I don't believe in, the fear is there, but I can choose not to act on that fear. And similarly, women all the time often need to, calmly and politely refuse the advances of men that they're not interested in, without screaming or running away, or without calling him an abuser. Unfortunately, women do sometimes go too far in their condemnation of men's advances. This video is not about that. I'm just trying to explain to the men watching, and it is mostly men who watch this channel, that they perhaps don't understand fully what is going on in the minds of women. To take it down to basic biology, a woman who is raped has the possibility of getting pregnant by an unsuitable mate, and for a woman biologically that means paying a heavy cost. It means being pregnant for 9 months. It means giving up 9 months of potentially getting pregnant by a good suitable mate, and then subsequently having to care for the child after it's born. It's something that natural selection would want to deter. To the extent that natural selection wants to do anything, it would be beneficial from an evolutionary point of view if women would try to avoid that situation almost at any cost. And it would also be beneficial if men would have a similar reaction to women they are either paired with or that they are directly related to. If men had an instinct to protect their genes, either in the form of their sisters or their daughters, even their mothers, or to protect the woman that they have paired with, their mate. And that is what we see. The simping phenomenon is real. To put a light spin on it, men are very protective of their sisters and mothers and daughters, and they're very suspicious of the suitors of these women. If you're a single man and you're trying to gauge how your advances might appear to a woman, and if you're trying to not frighten women, or if you're just any man trying to approach a woman on the street to ask if she can get you any drugs, it might be helpful to apply the mental trick of imagining that woman is your sister or your mother. Imagine that she's your daughter, and asking if you would like another man to be doing that to her. That would be my advice for where to draw the line with flirting and harassment and catcalling. But the point I'm trying to make is that catcalling is or can be alarming for women if it's from an unwanted man. My experience with catcalling is quite limited. From the female friends that I've talked to about it, it seems like the catcalling phenomenon is something that happens to not just extremely attractive girls, but girls who dress in a certain way. And I'm absolutely not trying to shame any women for wanting to dress however they like. That's not my decision to make. But there are consequences that come with the way that we present ourselves. And it seems that women are not completely oblivious to the effect that their clothing choices have on men. If you don't want to get catcalled, if you really hate being catcalled, and if it makes you feel nervous, you can just dress like I do and be extremely frumpy. I just do that because that's my own personal sense of style. But that being said, although I've never been catcalled, although I've never been, harassed or people don't comment on my appearance often if they're strangers or otherwise. I did experience something odd when I started riding a bike regularly. Before I had a driver's license, I used to ride a bike to work every day, and a really strange thing started to happen where teenage boys started to like heckle me. They weren't commenting on my appearance; they would just, and I can't even tell you what they would just be shouting at me basically. If they were walking home from school and they saw me, they would like to comment on, I don't know, my cycling. The fact that I was on a bike was somehow really amusing to them, and that wasn't frightening. It was just a couple of kids, and I was on a bike that was speedily, heading away from them. But it was just humiliating, and I don't know why those kids did that and why they picked on me because I was on a bike. It's just bizarre. But once when I was coming home from work, I was cycling along the edge of the road, and these kids overtook me on their mopeds. And one of them who overtook me, when he was out in front of me, he pulled down his trousers and showed me his bum as he hurtled away, which I found hilarious. I I told everyone about it after it happened. I just couldn't believe it. I don't know what was going through that kid's head. I mean, I don't think he was trying to make me laugh. I think he was trying to humiliate me. But I thought it was really funny, and I'm very glad to be sharing that story with you now because it's just bizarre. But I would like to end on a serious note after all that, because as uncomfortable as it is to be to get attention from people in that way, especially men who are bigger and stronger than you. That it can be very intimidating to be forced to be in that situation when you really weren't expecting to have to put up with someone's comments or whatever. It's not pleasant, but I think we have to ask if women really are as strong as men, or if women really are strong and powerful, then can we really take these complaints seriously? If women are going to be equal to men in the modern world, in the workplace, if we expect women to hold all the positions of power that men do we have to keep taking these claims of being so easily frightened? How can we expect men and women to work together if women can't handle this kind of unwanted attention and yes, disgusting comments? There are much worse things out there in the world than an unattractive, disgusting man saying nasty things about your body. If we expect women to be able to take care of themselves and to take on all of these things without needing a man, without relying on their fathers and their husbands, then I think we need to expect women to act a little bit tougher and take care of themselves. And I'm not talking about murder or kidnapping or abuse. I'm just talking about the words that we'd rather not hear from men that we'd rather not interact with. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Please leave your comments about anything that I've said or any thoughts on this subject. I do read all of my comments, and I love to hear what you guys are thinking when you watch my videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Hopefully in the light this time. Of discussions about catcalling and about